This is actually a quote from the indictment that Lemon posted himself at the main door of the church, where he confronted some congregants and physically obstructed them as they tried to exit, challenging them with facts about U.S. immigration policy. So that is what the indictment says. I'm not stating whether I agree with that, but that's what the indictment says. So, look,
They also characterized him as intimidating a pastor who he was calmly interviewing. So I think we also have to, the characterization of him conducting journalism is also something to be questioned.
In today's video, Abby Phillip shuts down Lydia Moynihan on Newsnight with Abby Phillip as the debate explodes over press freedom, government overreach, and the targeting of independent journalists. Abby Phillip challenges Lydia Moynihan on accountability, democracy, and the growing backlash to how reporters are being treated. So let's dive in and watch how Abby Phillip shuts down Lydia Moynihan on Newsnight with Abby Phillip.
And my panel is back with me. She says very clearly, Adam, that she believes that this started in Los Angeles and it's part of an ongoing effort of Donald Trump's to erode democracy.
I think all of Donald Trump's actions over the past year have been an attempt to erode democracy, and he's becoming increasingly desperate as we head into the midterm. So the attacks on the press are attacks to make sure there's not transparency. Attacks on college campuses or colleges, it's to make sure that critical thinking students aren't coming out of these colleges to debunk the administration. He attacks law firms, he attacks any single check, and this is a perfect example of him trying to push a chilling effect within independent journalism. So Don Lemon is an independent journalist. I think independent journalism is incredibly important, and it's the one variable this administration hasn't really gone after super hard. So now he's targeting not only Don Lemon, but multiple other people in order to create this overall chilling effect which erodes democracy.
Abby, can I pick up on something that Mayor Bass said? I live in Los Angeles, and so very, obviously, very aware of the presence of ICE and what it had been there during the time that she was referring. But I want to talk about what she said in terms of mentioning why we need to remind ourselves of the racial element of this. There is a reason why I think a reason why Donald Trump not only picked independent journalists, but black journalists in particular. Clearly, we know there's no love lost between Don Lemon and Donald Trump, that he's been very critical of the president. The president they've gone back and forth. But if we go back and undo all the layers of all of this, it was black journalists that were really at the forefront of calling Donald Trump out, from the birtherism movement throughout a lot of the things that they saw early before the rest of the press really picked up on some of the things that concerned a lot of black journalists. Hello, me, who also called out Donald Trump in 2017. And the reason why I think he picked these particular journalists is being independent. You don't have the backing of a CNN. You don't have the backing of a big network. The other part of it, too, is that if you can make them the face of this issue that is happening in Minneapolis, we know that given some of the racial issues that we have in this country, it is likely to have a lot less sympathy because they are journalists, one, and people hate the press, and two, because they're black. And so I do think that that's an important part of this, especially given the president's own language when it comes to anti-DEI and making black people the face of woke, and all that we've heard from this administration. All of this is combined together and meant to drum up a certain sentiment against these journalists so that people are supporting their own rights being eroded because of who they think it's happening to.
When issues like this get heated, it helps to zoom out and look at the institutional patterns. Over the past decade, the US has slipped in several global democracy and press freedom indexes, with researchers pointing to political hostility toward the media and efforts to discredit election systems as stress points. That environment makes aggressive rhetoric toward journalists more than just talk. It signals to supporters that the press is an enemy instead of a watchdog. Once that mindset spreads, transparency suffers because sources hesitate, whistleblowers pull back, and accountability reporting gets harder to sustain across local and national newsrooms nationwide. Independent journalists sit in an even tighter spot. Without the legal muscle of major networks, they're more exposed to lawsuits, credential denials, and online harassment campaigns that can drain time and money. media law experts have warned about the rise of strategic lawsuits against public participation, or slap-style actions, which are often less about winning in court and more about intimidating critics into silence. Add digital surveillance tools and doxing culture, and the barrier to entry for press intimidation drops fast. When that pressure builds, self-censorship increases, and stories that challenge powerful people are the first to quietly disappear entirely. Race also shapes how these conflicts land. Surveys from journalism organizations have found that Black reporters, especially women, receive disproportionate levels of online abuse and credibility attacks compared with white peers. That kind of targeting doesn't just hurt individuals, it sends a message about who is allowed to question power. Historically, some of the earliest and most persistent scrutiny of controversial political figures has come from Black media voices, from civil rights coverage to modern investigative work. When those voices face heavier backlash, it risks narrowing the range of perspectives in national conversations, which ultimately weakens democratic debate itself overall.
Even if you don't agree that there's race as an underlying factor here, it does seem very clear that the Trump administration, Lydia, views this as a slam dunk because Don in particular can be polarizing. And I think they feel like it's an easy way for them to chip away at the media. And look, again, you don't have to like or agree with anything that Don has said or done. But the right of the media, as you pointed out, extends not just to, Don, but also even to conservative media as well. And that's the part I don't understand. Why is it suddenly okay just because it's Don Lemon, just because it's Georgia Ford, that Trump is trying to criminalize the exercise of the free press, the actual reporting that they were doing on the ground?
Well, also, I just want to respond because you accused me of mischaracterizing the indictment. This is actually a quote from the indictment that Lemon posted himself at the main door of the church, where he confronted some congregants and physically obstructed them as they tried to exit, challenging them with facts about U.S. immigration policy. So that is what the indictment says. I'm not stating whether I agree with that, but that's what the indictment says. So, look,
They also characterized him as intimidating a pastor who he was calmly interviewing. So I think we also have to, the characterization of him conducting journalism is also something to be questioned.
Look, I think there's obviously a lot of journalists in Minneapolis. The notion that they're just randomly targeting somebody because of their politics or their race is a little unfair. If you read the indictment, are going after him because they think that he acted more as a protester than a journalist. But again, I think we need to be really careful when it comes to freedom of the press.
And you brought up that Capitol January 6th person from the Blaze who was charged, and I looked it up because there are a few other examples that I actually have of some of the things that those other people who claim to be journalists did. But this other person, Steve Baker, said, first of all, he entered the Capitol through a broken window. He antagonized police officers who were trying to keep him out. He said in an affidavit he approved 100% of what was happening. He stood in Nancy Pelosi's office and says, the only thing that I regret is that I didn't steal the computer because God knows what I could have found on their computers if I had done that.
When this kind of clash happens, the bigger principle at stake is whether press rights depend on popularity. The First Amendment doesn't carve out exceptions for reporters people find annoying or partisan. Courts have repeatedly held that news gathering in public spaces is broadly protected, even during tense law enforcement situations. Once the government starts framing routine reporting as suspicious, it creates a precedent that can be flipped on any outlet later. History shows surveillance of journalists from COINTELPRO to post-9/11 leak probes tends to expand quietly, and rolling that power back after normalization is incredibly difficult for a free society. Another piece people overlook is how selective enforcement chills coverage. Media lawyers note that the threat of arrest, equipment seizure, or drawn-out legal battles often matters more than a conviction because smaller or independent outlets can't absorb the cost. That pressure encourages self-censorship, especially on stories involving federal agencies or protest activity. Data from journalism safety groups show spikes in reporter detentions during demonstrations over the past several years across different administrations. When officials blur the line between documenting events and participating in them, it muddies standards that working journalists rely on to do their jobs safely in the field. Then there's the double standard problem. Professional reporting comes with ethics codes, editorial review, and legal guidance that separate it from people who join unlawful activity and later claim a press label. Courts have long recognized that being a journalist is not a shield for committing crimes, but they've also warned against guilt by association. If authorities use extreme cases to justify broader crackdowns, legitimate reporters get swept into suspicion by default. That erodes public trust and narrows the range of voices willing to cover controversial beats, which ultimately leaves citizens less informed about how power is exercised in government.
So, pretty egregious conduct, which is why he pled guilty and then waited for a pardon, which later came from President
Well, again, it's that line between journalist and participant. And one other detail, and it was interesting that the mayor picked up on this, because I picked up on this as well earlier, having done a lot of bail hearings. The prosecution here asked the judge to take Don's passport, to make him post bail, and to restrict his travel to New York and Minnesota,
and
right, for the court.
He's on the lam.
The legal reason you ask for those restrictions is because you believe someone is a risk of flight. We're going to have the fugitive Don Lemon. This guy doesn't go below 14th Street here in Manhattan.
Okay.
And he's going to take off to some foreign country. I mean, it's overkill by DOJ. And I think they're tipping their hand by that kind of thing.
It's not believable, right? You go before a judge and you say something like that, and the judge is like,
where's he going?
How
is he going somewhere?
Can we just talk about Karen Bass for a minute, too? She said she wakes up every day worried about Donald Trump. I mean, 7,000 houses burned down, and she was in Ghana last year. I think she should wake up every day trying to get those houses rebuilt. There's only been 10 that have been rebuilt. LA is a disaster. I was there last week. RVs lining the street because there's 200,000 people who don't have homes. I'm very tired, especially of Mamdani and Bass opining on all of these national issues when their cities need people who are managing what's going on the street.
Her city is often under attack by the person that is the president. I think she
also
has
wants
every
houses to be more expensive.
Exactly.
Anyway, so.
I think she has every right to be concerned.
He quite literally said that.
Coming up next, despite below freezing temperatures, millions of Americans across the country joined anti-ICE protests.
What stands out in this is how easily legal tools meant for serious threats get stretched into political theater. Federal pretrial restrictions are typically reserved for people with clear flight risk indicators like foreign assets, prior evasion, or non-compliance histories. When those conditions don't exist, piling on travel limits can look less like procedure and more like signaling. Civil liberties groups have warned for years that overcharging and over-restricting defendants in high-profile cases sends a message beyond the courtroom. It tells observers that visibility or criticism of power can quietly raise the legal temperature around you. There's also a broader press freedom context people forget. The US has actually dropped in multiple global press freedom rankings over the past decade, with journalist arrests at protests cited as a factor by monitoring organizations. That decline didn't happen in a vacuum. It tracks with more aggressive law enforcement responses to public demonstrations and expanded use of federal statutes. When authorities blur documentation with participation, it creates uncertainty that discourages on-the-ground reporting. That uncertainty doesn't just affect national figures. Freelancers and local reporters who lack legal teams on standby feel the pressure first and often pull back from risky but important coverage. On the governance side, national and local issues aren't mutually exclusive the way critics pretend. Mayors regularly lobby federal agencies because housing funds, disaster relief, and immigration enforcement policies all flow from Washington. After major disasters, rebuilding timelines are heavily shaped by federal approvals, insurance disputes, and supply chain bottlenecks, not just city hall decisions. Urban policy researchers note that housing shortages in big cities are tied to zoning law, investment trends, and federal interest rates as much as mayoral leadership. So engaging national politics isn't distraction. It's often part of the job when federal power directly shapes local outcomes. Pause. Are you getting tired of getting half the story from biased news sources? One outlet says one thing and another says the complete opposite. how are you supposed to know what's actually true? That's where ground news comes in. It lets you compare how different media outlets, left, right, and center, are covering the same story. So you can see the full picture instead of just the echo chamber. And here's the best part. Click the link in the description and get 40% off the Vantage tier, which gives you even deeper insights into media bias and political trends. Stay informed, think for yourself, and check out ground news in the description down below.